what happens is your brain is like a library. It's like, and if you look at like an iceberg, for example, the subconscious part of your brain is 90% below water. The conscious is at 10% above water. What intuition does from birth is it starts collecting all these experiences, both good and bad, all your learning, both formal and informal, from day one, and it continues on a daily basis. And it's putting these things in the subconscious area of your brain like a library. So the moment that you have to make a decision, your intuition pulls from that library the experiences that are relevant to the decision that you're making and says, here you go. You've already got the skills to make that decision. All you got to do is trust the signal I'm giving you. And so that's experiential intuition.
I'm Summer.
And I'm Mike.
And we got married with children.
It's been 12 years since we got this gang together.
And we're still running the rapids of living with a blended family.
And sometimes that is just not easy.
If you're looking for support and tools when it comes to divorce, step-parenting, co-parenting, and giving it your best,
you're in the right place.
We're talking about everything.
You ready to get this party started?
Always. Hey, Mike.
Okay, before Summer starts, this is literally what just happened. She said, hey, I'm not going to tell you what we're talking about today. I just want you to go with it. So in advance, I am putting it out there that I do not know what is about to come.
He does not know about this interview yet.
I have not been made privy to whatever is about to happen.
He doesn't know. So, Michael, do you know that you have something inside of you that pretty much has the answers that you're looking for to all of your problems?
Is it a conscience?
I don't know if you have one of those. I'm still determining.
Oh.
No, but the ones that you have the answers to the things that can solve your problems, determine good choices versus the bad choices, and ultimately will make your life better. Do you know that you have this?
Why am I picturing Pinocchio, the story of Pinocchio right now? Jiminy Cricket, like...
That's the thing inside you, Pinocchio?
Pinocchio didn't have a conscience because he wasn't a real boy. So he made bad choices, and then when he'd lie, his nose would grow.
Okay.
You know the story
said
of
you're
Pinocchio.
Picturing Pinocchio, so when you said that, I'm like, you're picturing Pinocchio inside of you. Are you the whale in this situation?
Oh, no. Oh, no, you didn't.
I did.
Do need to get some exercise, that's for sure.
Here's the thing. Most of us have this thing that I'm speaking of that you don't even know we're talking about yet, but many of us don't trust it, don't know how to access it, and unfortunately have big hurdles in the way of getting to take advantage of it.
Is it the Force?
It is kind of like the Force, actually. So let me tell you.
I'm ready.
Ready?
I'm
okay.
ready.
So I had the amazing opportunity to interview and speak with Sunil Godse. I asked him to come on the show because he has proven thousands of times how powerful this gift is and how we can use it. And holy cow, we all have a lot of problems and challenges when it comes to step parenting and co-parenting and divorce and all of those things. So wouldn't it be nice if we could get in touch with this thing that we all have inside of us to help us manage these things better? So he's actually going to tell his story better himself, but I will tell you brief little snippet. It started when he was just 5 years old, and his father told him that he couldn't have video games because they were too expensive. So something happened then, and then it happened again and again that got him realizing that he needed to pay attention to this thing that we're talking about.
Compounding interest?
That would be amazing. But no, I don't have Tony Robbins on the show today. So make sure that you listen to this entire interview because...
What is it that we're talking about?
Should I tell you now or should I let him tell it?
I guess...
I think we should let him tell it. Let's let him tell it because he's going to tell us incredible stories of how we can access this gift.
Is it the law of attraction?
No, it's not.
Okay.
Make sure, though, that you listen because he's got some free goodies for you at the very end that we give away, which, of course, are also in the show notes.
You're going to make me wait.
I'm going to make you wait.
I can get it out of you.
What I'm not going to make you wait for right now is this week's...
Oh, it's time for us to read the super sneaky letter again.
The super sneaky letter. It's the anonymous letter. Yep. As you guys may or may not know, you have the ability to head over to our website at everythingalways.co, click on forum and do what?
you can submit an anonymous letter, which gives you a safe place to talk about pretty much whatever you want. And we don't know who sent it. And sometimes we delete them right away. And sometimes we read them on our show.
Yeah, some people, although we want you to have the opportunity to get angry, sometimes it's just unfortunately inappropriate for us to read some, even though we totally get it. We totally get where you're coming from. Some of the things are a little bit. So please send us your vents, and please send us the letters that you would like to send to somebody, but
they don't always have to be.
It's kind of a family listening.
They can also be the nice thing that you'd like to say, but you can't because you've built a dynamic of only saying crappy things.
Guess what? That's why I'm actually really excited about today's. It is so sweet. I read it beforehand, and I'm so excited to share this one.
Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. Here we go. My sister, I am writing this anonymous letter to put out some good energy and acknowledgement for you. You were my maid of honor at my wedding and were there every step of the way as I became a stepmom and then had my daughter. You were the best support ever, but you always said that you would never marry someone with kids, and I told you that was probably a good idea, LOL. And not 2 years later, I was now your matron of honor at your wedding. I remember you telling me how excited you were when you met him, but that he did have 2 young kids. You went through with it because you two are just so good together. You did all the right things. You went to counseling beforehand. You decided whether you would both have kids together or not. You talked about what your money would look like, and you even became friends with his ex. I know that things got harder along the way, and I've watched how you handle it with such grace. You are so strong, and you have been such a great example to those kids and to your niece, and even to me, your older sister. I want to send out love and good energy into the universe in honor of you. I see you put on a smile even though things are hard. I see you do the right things and not get noticed for it. You go out of your way for other people, even those that aren't nice to you, and I honor you for that. You are so private about your struggles, and I respect that. So this is just a way for me to ask the universe to send your beautiful soul all the support and love you need to get through this time. Love, me.
I love it. And
I got goosebumps
I'm going to challenge you, anonymous writer. Send that letter.
Just send it. Yes.
That's like the kind of thing you should write in a card and just send it. That's going to make someone's day.
You know, I secretly wonder, maybe
just send them a link to the podcast.
Maybe they're listeners, and maybe she's like, I know exactly why I'm sending this letter because she listens to this. We never know. You never know.
But we do not know this.
We know at least one of you listen.
That is super cool. And you know what? Thanks for taking the time to write that. I'm sure that
is awesome. I feel the good energy going out. So thank you so much. And
but we don't have any more time for this. I need to find out.
He needs to find out
what the secret thing is that's inside of me. That's not the force. It's not a conscience. It's not the law of attraction. It's not. I don't know. We're gonna find out.
Here we go.
Hi, Sunil. Welcome to the show. I'm so grateful to have you here today to discuss this topic.
Thank you so much, Summer. I'm looking really forward to speaking to your listeners and educating them on this thing called intuition, which we all have, yet for some reason we ignore it to waste time making bad decisions. And starting from today, your listeners can stop that from happening.
Isn't that the truth? We definitely do that.
Yes.
Yeah, this is a unique topic. You know, we're always talking about how to solve problems, or how we can actually cope with challenges that come along with being in a blended family. And this is something that we totally overlook. So I'm really happy that we get to dive into this. And the goal for listeners is to walk away with being able to trust that. But we're going to learn more about how to do that. Before we do that, I would love to hear how, what's your background and what's the story behind you teaching this topic and helping so many people with it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the CEO and founder of Intuitionology, or intuitionology.com. And the genesis of this whole idea of really taking a deep dive or opening cracking open the hood on intuition really came from my first book called Fail Fast, Succeed Faster. And at that time, the book was all about, if you're to learn from the lessons and failures of others and you don't repeat them, then you should be able to succeed faster. And so when I used to speak on stages around the world on that book, the one question I kept getting from the audience is, Sunil, give me one thing that's going to make me successful as an entrepreneur, as a business executive. And so at that time, I used to roll my eyes and say, well, this is why I have a 400-page book. This is why I interviewed 300 people and 75 stories made it in, until I went back to the audio recordings. And when I did, 80 to 90% of those people had said some version of either I ignored my intuition, I ignored my gut, I knew what the right decision was, something like that. And it really got me intrigued. Like, why did all these people make these failures and hurdles such a high percentage? Because they ignored this thing called intuition. And so I reflected back to my life to say, okay, when did intuition kind of affect me? And so I remember when I was 5 years old, I distinctly remember that there were these video games that my dad wanted me to buy, or that I wanted to buy, sorry. And my dad said they're too expensive. And so there's this voice that told me, Sunil, go door to door and raise money. And I listened to that voice. It's this 5-year-old kid going door to door, lots of milk and cookies. And I raised $200. $100 went to my dad. The other $100 went to charity because at my school was doing that. And then I reflected about, okay, so that's what happens when I trusted this thing. When did I ignore it? And 3 big instances come right away. So the first one was, and for those who can't see, I'm a South Asian male. And so there's 4 career doors you can have as a South Asian male. It's doctor, lawyer, engineer, or failure. And that's it. And so I picked door number 3. I was about to say 4. And door number 3 was engineering. My dad was an engineer, and I got in, even though my intuition was screaming, or something was telling me, because I didn't formally know it as intuition. Something was saying, this is not the path for you. Yet I ignored that, and I became the engineer, and I really hated it. And 2 years into that stint, I got an opportunity to become a private investor with a Mexican restaurant chain that came up to Canada. And hopped on board, and pretty soon I was making 5 times more in dividends as a private investor than I was, full-time in engineering. And so the dam had to break. I quit in year number 3, sacrificed my dad's relationship. He didn't speak to me after that, but that was necessary. I ended up becoming an entrepreneur 6 ventures later, $20 million in revenues, and loved it. Ended up morphing into a management consultant. And then I got this huge contract, massive amounts of money down in Silicon Valley, and to a Canadian person that's big to get recognized down there. But the contract terms started changing. And again, this something was saying, back off. And I ignored it because I was so emotionally tied to the dollars that this company was going to pay me that I spent every single penny to go down there. And the company didn't pay me. And I came back to Canada with 25 cents in my bank account, 23 cents to be exact. And my wife was so I met her in India, so we were about to be married. So she's phoning me and she's saying, how are things going? And I said, great. Meanwhile, all the marriage money was gone, and I didn't know where I was going to sleep that night. And perhaps the most devastating was when I was doing my engineering in university. I was doing some personal coaching at the time, and I had a friend reach out to me to try and get some advice. She was being stalked. And so she says, Sunil, I really need some advice. And again, this something was urging me to meet with her that afternoon. And for some dumb reason, I said, no, I'm going to be, let's meet a couple of days later. And the very next day, that same fellow walked up to her in a bus shelter and put a bullet through her head.
Oh my gosh.
And so now I really needed to figure out, what is this thing called intuition? That's now I've lost time, money, effort, and a good friend. And so I couldn't find a definition. I didn't know. I knew how it affected me. I went online, people were talking about voices from God, manifestation. That didn't resonate with me. It resonated with other people. And so I just couldn't, like, okay, so I had it when I was 5. There's these somethings, like what's going on? And so I remember these signals that somebody was talking about, these signals, and there was this intuitive channeler, an international psychic, that talked about it. So I went to her and actually got her interview, and she said that it's energetic in nature, and our belief systems are not there, and there's little to no research at all yet. And so I like the energy part, because back in engineering, I saw materials as kind of a material that has mass and energy, or wave-like properties, as steel has that, and every material has that. So I kind of saw this as, okay, kind of like art and science type of thing. But so I've got the art part, which is these signals. What about the science part like this? So this intuitive channeler, she's saying there's no science. And I said, well, there's got to be. Like, if 80-90% of people in my book said it had, and I experienced this, like, why is there no science? So I went to a neurologist and talked to him. And I wasn't expecting him to say much. And so I turn on the camera and say, okay, his name's Dr. Michelle Rathbone. I said, Michelle, does intuition exist? I'm thinking this could be a 5-minute conversation. He goes, it absolutely does. He goes on to the neurology of it and how it hits the gut and how he trusts it with his patients, how he never ignores it, or the times he has, it was a mistake. And what he also said is that more and more neuroscience research is coming out that it's intuition happens much earlier than we actually consciously think about it. And I'm going, that's really interesting. So I went to an academic database to say, okay, if I type in intuition, maybe I'm going to get 10, 12 articles, and at least I've got something to leapfrog off of. I type in the word intuition and tens of thousands of articles on intuition. One of the premises I had is, well, if I heard it when I was 5, then we must be born with it. And lo and behold, there's this research article that shows that infants as young as 2 months old have shown intuitive tendencies, or intuitive physics, as this paper calls it. And the reason why I couldn't find a definition is because intuition hits the amygdala. That's the primitive part of your brain, as well as something called the prefrontal cortex. But it's all in the primitive area. All it knows is fight or flight. There's no language associated with it. So no wonder I couldn't find a definition. So we all define it in our own way. We just have these feelings of what intuition is like. And so for the people I've interviewed for my podcast series, when I ask them about their definition, generally it comes down to a feeling.
Yeah.
And so the science is now backing that up. And then what Dr. Rathbone was saying was that it happens much earlier than we think. And lo and behold, here's a paper that says intuition acts on average 7 to 10 seconds before we actually make an action or take a decision. 7 to 10 seconds. And a colleague of mine saying that better research methods are coming out at a University of Toronto that's tracking that as early as 23 seconds before we actually make a decision or we're conscious of it. That's a long time.
Yeah.
And so now I've got this research, and now that's when my second book came in. And so if we look at the art part, these signals, I interviewed over 1,000 people to figure out, okay, how does intuition actually work here for people? And when it comes to signals, there's 2 main types. There's positive and negative signals. The positive signals are the ones that tell you, yes, this is a decision to make. So for me, for example, a signal is a flow. The dots are connecting. And for another, there's a CEO I interviewed, and he sees this omen, no shape or no color, but on his right back shoulder, he sees this omen. So if he's doing a business deal or hiring someone and that omen pops up, he says yes to whatever he's doing. That's just how strong his positive signal is. Then we also have negative signals. Negative signals are the warnings. These are the ones that we really, really ignore a lot because
I was going to say, this must be the ones we ignore.
These we ignore. And the reason is because they actually start very subtle in nature. So Oprah calls it a whisper. And so we've all been through situations where we walk into a room and we just kind of go, something is off. Mm-hmm. And that's the subtle signal. And so if you start ignoring those subtle signals, what happens is they start to get louder and louder until you can no longer ignore them anymore. And in some cases, some of my interviewees have attributed being in a car crash or trying to take their own lives as the ultimate negative signal before they go back on track to trusting their intuition again. And so for me, for example, these negative signals are like the hairs on the back of my neck standing up, or even getting an annoying gut feeling. And I had one entrepreneur I interviewed, and he didn't even know what his signals were because nobody ever asks him. It's not like, let's go for a cup of coffee. What are your intuitive signals? I mean, this is not part of what you normally talk about, right? And so I started talking about his signals. And he says, Sunil, I don't know. But anyways, we'll keep talking. And then I started asking him about the businesses that he got into, the failed ventures. And every single time he started talking about his failed ventures, his left earlobe got hot. And he just realized, oh my God, I've just realized what my negative signal is. And so now he remembers when he got into the signals, his left earlobe, or so into the ventures, his left earlobe got hot. When he talked to his wife about the bad ventures, his left earlobe got hot. And so this is where we have to really dig deep and take the time to figure out what these inventories of signals are. And where we have to be careful is, so let's say, Summer, you and I have let's say a voice is a negative signal, for example. Yeah. So if you do your work and you say that voice is signal number 1, that's great. You've done your work. For me, if I rely on that as signal number 1, but it's actually signal number 3, then what that means is I've missed 2 signals. And if I've missed 2 signals, that means that I've made 2 bad decisions. And so those 2 bad decisions could be just stubbing my toe, or I could be headed for bankruptcy. I don't know. And so when it comes to blended families now, just to interject that, so you've got a number of different personalities, you've got a number of different people. Everybody's going to have their own positive, negative signals. And the other thing within them is everybody's intuition is looking at everybody else's intuition. It's like this combination and permutation stuff that's keeping them safe. Some of them are in tune with their intuition. Some are out of touch with their intuition. Some people are falling prey to societal norms. Some people have others with bad intentions. So there's a lot of things that are outside the norm. And what intuition does really well is to make sure that people come back to their values of what they are, and give you the signals to make sure those values are strong. And what happens sometimes is, because in blended families, there's been some traumatic past or experience, the values, we don't start to trust ourselves. We weaken those values. Our emotions are stuck on some past trauma. And sometimes your intuition is giving you those signals, but you haven't released that trauma, or you haven't allowed that trauma. You haven't gotten for therapy, or you've gotten some help. Whatever the case is, you haven't allowed yourself to trust yourself. And in some cases, you're doing things in the past saying, I'm going to show that person, or I'm going to be better than that person, or I want to be, society wants me to be this. And so we're dealing with reactions from the past when we're not actually living in the present. We're not listening to our signals, and we're not walking, one foot in front of each other with those signals. And in some cases, this is where we talk about intuition as a theme on social media. Trust my gut, trust my intuition. But based on what I've done in terms of signals, they don't know what they're talking about, right? And the other thing I also discovered is that there's actually 4 types of intuition that all work together in a split second to help you make the decision, and it sends you these signals. And the best way I can show you how these 4 work is by introducing you to a non-believer that I had and showing him how these 4 types work. So there's a colleague of mine, John Rothschild. This guy was an investment banker.
Okay.
Data, spreadsheets, experiences, all that matters. When you go online and you start talking about things coming from the cosmos and voices from God, he's going to say, nah, intuition just does not exist. There's just no way. And so I go down to see him. He says, I have no clue what we're going to talk about, Sunil. I don't think intuition exists, but come on down. I'll give you an hour and we'll talk about intuition for about 5 minutes, and the rest of the 55 minutes, you know what? We'll have a coffee and just catch up.
Yeah.
So I turn on the cameras and I tell them about the CEO who sees omens, and just to, get him on board. Like, yeah, there are business executives that experience this stuff. And he's just actually, you hear him on camera. Sunil, you know what? I'd like to shake his hand. Intuition it's about learning and experience and data. And so now I'm going to start talking about the 4 types of intuition. One of the 4 types is called experiential intuition. And so we talked earlier about being born with intuition. What happens is, your brain is like a library. It's like, and if you look at like an iceberg, for example, the subconscious part of your brain is 90% below water. The conscious is at 10% above water. What intuition does from birth is it starts collecting all these experiences, both good and bad, all your learning, both formal and informal, from day one, and it continues on a daily basis. And it's putting these things in the subconscious area of your brain like a library. So the moment that you have to make a decision, your intuition pulls from that library the experiences that are relevant to the decision that you're making and says, here you go. You've already got the skills to make that decision. All you got to do is trust the signal I'm giving you. And so that's experiential intuition. And so as I was explaining this to John, I said, in some cases, your intuition has you go against the data. And then he goes, well, that's kind of funny. I have an example for you. And I said, well, please tell, John. So John was in the business of restaurants, and what he was doing franchises like McDonald's, A&W, those guys, Burger King. And to put a franchise location in, they use a benchmarking system. So basically, if out of a 10, if you were a 9 out of 10 in a location, you would put a franchise there, and they look at traffic patterns, demographic data, development of the area as examples. There's this one location in a dilapidated area of Toronto, Canada, and it was a 5.5 out of 10 based on his friends, his team. There's no way they would have put a location there. But him and his partner go to this location, and now we're going to talk about the second of 4 called situational intuition. Okay. Situational intuition looks at the situation and tells you that either it's a great situation, go ahead, or there's something warning you about that, you better back off. Him and his partner look at this area, and he says, there's something here that's telling me that we need to put a location here. And now he's starting to use perhaps his intuition, I'm not sure, but they did. And that ended up being the beer market, which is the most profitable portfolio that they had in all of the restaurant portfolios ever.
Wow.
And so now he's kind of getting convinced. And there came a time we started talking about team building. We started talking about family. We started talking about a whole bunch of other things. And eventually he tells me his purpose changes. He wants to stop being an investment banker, and he wants to actually run a business. He wants to be a coach, not someone sitting on the sidelines or in the stands. And now we're going to get into the third of the 4 called relational intuition. This is also very important for blended families. What relational intuition does is it filters those people out that what they do is you leave the people out that aren't aligned with your purpose or where you want to go, or people who are being deceitful. And this is where they're looking at things like tone, body language, twitches, words matches the action, or just people not in line with your purpose at all. His purpose had changed. He wanted to be now someone running a business. Everybody concerned with money, fame, high-end restaurants, ego, security, private jets, limousines. All of those people said, John, you're nuts. Not one of them asked him, why do you want to do this? Not one of them bothered to ask him that. And the only one person that he turned to for advice was his wife. And then he looks at her straight into her eyes and says, and now I'm quoting him here, this just feels right. There's your intuitive signal. Yeah. So now I've got a non-believer to recognizing intuition exists, telling me about his intuitive signal. And now we're going to get into the fourth of the 4 called creative intuition. Creative intuition is the ultimate decision maker using the other 3. And so if you're just doing things like eating your lunch or turning left, your creative intuition is pretty low. That's pretty mundane stuff. But when you're about to do something that's so crazy, like John was about to do, that's when your creative intuition is high. And you would think that John, being an investment banker, very successful, probably making $3 to $4 million a year, would pick a business to run that has healthy cash flows, strong revenues, good balance sheet.
Right.
His intuition said, you're going to run a tiny bankrupt little restaurant. And so he quit. He walked into that tiny bankrupt little restaurant, and that restaurant ended up being Eastside Mario's location number 1. And over the next 20 years, he grew that one location into over 1,000 under different brand names and $2 billion in revenues, all because it just felt right. And that's the power of intuition.
Have you ever wanted to send an anonymous message or letter to someone? For me, the most powerful therapy has always been to write. If I feel angry, sad, super inspired, or just wanting to feel understood, I write, and often I write letters to someone when those feelings involve a particular person. When it comes to divorce, co-parenting, step-parenting, new relationships, and everything that comes along with blended families, there tends to be a lot we don't say and a lot we wish we could say. And it feels so good writing a letter as if you are going to send it to that person. It's like this huge pressure off of your chest. It's kind of cathartic. Well, we want to offer you that forum where you can have a voice. Anonymously, of course. If there's something you've always wanted to say to someone, but knew that out of respect or to save drama or because you knew it wouldn't be received well, now is your chance to get it out there and have it be read, because we would like to serve as your voice. So here's what to do. Head over to everythingalways.co/forum. That's
everythingalways.co/forum and fill out the form. We won't know who you are as it will be sent to us totally anonymously. It just hits our inbox, but we have no idea who it's coming from. As they come in, we will be sharing these on the podcast. We'll be able to reply to you. You'll still remain anonymous unless you reply back. And we'll let you know if it will be featured. It's 100% confidential. So what do you say? Ready to get it off your chest? Okay, back to the episode.
I love this so much. I'm all about all of this, but now of course I have a ton of questions.
Absolutely.
So I think everyone listening, I know for me especially, has had those moments where you followed the intuition and you knew it. And then you have those moments where you look back and you go, I knew that was going to happen, and I still went through with that choice anyways.
Yep.
I also know that there are moments when people will, it's almost like you talk yourself out of it, or you talk yourself into feeling that this is the right thing because you want it to be the right thing, but it's not. What can we do as humans with this wonderful gift of intuition?
Yep.
How can we be more in tune with that so that it is like a really clear sign to us, instead of, I think, I'm not sure. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely does. Okay. So the first thing you need to do is spend the time, and this people can do this right after they finish listening. If they haven't already started thinking about the decisions they made in the past, is what you do is you get a piece of paper and you write the good decisions you made and what did it feel like at that moment. And then you write down the bad decisions you made and what did it feel like at that moment. And when you think about the bad decisions, you have to think, was that decision number 1 or was that decision number 4? And you really got to think, okay, what was the decision before that got me to make that decision? And what decision did you get me before that? And so what happens is now you're going to get an inventory of your positive and negative signals. And then you're just going to start making a decision that's based on your signals. So once you've taken that time, the next decision you make is going to be met with either a positive signal or a subtle, or hopefully a subtle negative signal. If you make that decision and something bad happens, then you haven't done enough work in figuring out, because now you've got a negative signal that came and you ignored it. And so now you have to add that to your inventory. And so I also have a 7-day challenge, which is free, by the way, on my website. And in that 7-day challenge, I basically get you to take a problem that you haven't solved. And in the 7 days, you're going to solve that problem. You're going to actually have an action plan. I'm going to measure your intuition in terms of strength. And I've had over 54,000 people now through that. And 100% of the time, their intuition has gotten stronger.
I can't wait. I'm already, and I know everyone's going like, where do I get it? Where do I get it? Don't worry, we'll get you there. But
absolutely.
I'm definitely taking it.
For sure. And if you don't, again, you have to be mindful of this stuff. You have to make sure you're on top of it. And because there was one fellow who is a boxer, former boxer. He went through the 7-day challenge. We even had one-on-one coaching with him to get him tapped into signals. And he actually ignored his intuition, which resulted in his only 4 professional losses, all because he ignored his intuition. He actually revealed to me when I took his interview that he actually was peeing blood and his testosterone levels were too high, and ego got the best of him. Ego is one of the 4 intuitive hurdles, which we can get into. And he actually, so even through my coaching, even through the 7-day challenge, he didn't do the work. And I remember I was walking around at Costco with my wife, and boom, I get a text message from him. And he basically says, your bleep works. And he said that I ignored it, and he lost $2,000 to a scam. And he said, I knew the moment that person was telling me what was it, I knew it was a scam. My intuition told me it was a scam. I ignored it, and he lost $2,000. And he said, let's set up the next boot camp. I need some more. Obviously, he needs some more work. And so this is where you really have to be vigilant and take those signals and go about it. And one of the things that people think is that, first of all, let's go into the 4 intuitive hurdles, because I think this might help before we get into the story. So there's 4 intuitive hurdles that when we don't trust ourselves, or we're doing things from the past that are spiting people, or we want to prove something to somebody, we're not actually living in the present moment. And when we don't trust ourselves, we have these 4 intuitive hurdles that squash these signals. And one of them is being too emotional, specifically in relationships, where we start talking ourselves out of a situation. Yet, even though we know we want to get out of a relationship, we become too emotional, and that hijacks the signals. The other side, flip side of that, is being too rational. So following societal norms. I did that as an engineer. Although my intuition was saying be the entrepreneur, I became the engineer because of societal norms. Then there's the other side, is ego. And ego is there's 2 sides to ego. One is narcissism, and the other side of ego is following the herd. So how many times do we hook up with a person in terms of being their friend, or, joining a clique because they're popular, or they're wearing a brand name, or they know someone famous, or we know that their values are different from us, but we still want to associate them for whatever reason. We internally know what our intention is, yet we still latch onto them. And this is where relational intuition comes really important, because you need to filter those people out, and people kind of move. It's ebb and flow. So if somebody's values change, obviously when you have a blended family, right, something changed in the initial family that happened, and maybe there's some values that were gone and that broke, and obviously for good. But what happens is now people change, and then you need to move them out of your circle of influence, or your inner circle. And so that's ego. And the last one is fear. And there's fear of change, fear of failure, fear of the unknown. And many people are at this, where they want to take a decision and they're fearful of it. The thing with intuition is that when you get a signal, remember, you're at the amygdala stage. It knows either fight or flight. Either you're going to be eaten by a saber-toothed tiger, or you're not. It's singular: trust, like, do. That's it. There's no language. There's no complex things. It's on or on. It's binary. So when you get a positive signal, even though you're fearful, that you've already done the work on the positive signal, and it's already said, listen, I've gone into your library of information here, and your subconscious, you've got this. You've been there before. I don't know what you're fearful for. But you have to trust that signal. You take the one step and you take the next step. And a really good story I have about this is there's a fellow by the name of David Dame, in his wheelchair all his life, cerebral palsy. And he gets a chance to live a dream. His biggest dream was to just have somebody hold him up and caress the sand and water from the ocean in his toes. Never been able to do this. He gets his chance. His friends take him up to the edge where the sand meets the water. He stands up and he falls flat on his face. And he's absolutely embarrassed. And the fear starts coming in. And he says, Sunil, I have 2 things I can do at this moment. The one thing I can do is I can get up and sit back in my wheelchair and forever regret the dream that was about to turn into a reality. Or I can trust my intuitive signal that's saying, take the next step. Take the next step, and then take the next step, and then take the next step. And that's exactly what he did. And so his handlers lifted him up one by one. He stepped into the ocean one by one, and he signals to his chin, and he says, the water gets up to my chin. And that's when he turns around. And when he did turn around, he had not realized how far he had come. That's how you use the power of intuition, your intuitive signals that are telling you to drive through that fear, listen to the signals, because when you live moment by moment and listen to those signals, one by one, you reach your goals, you open the doors of opportunity, and you don't just never realize how far you come. And coming back earlier to how some people think that intuition drives them through bad situations as a learning lesson. But that's not true. Your intuition is always right. And I had Mark Metry was one of my podcast guests, and he has the Humans 2.0 web podcast series. It's, I think, top 100 on Apple. And he developed social anxiety in high school, and eventually that led to him almost taking his life. And he was trying to tell me that story, and I pay attention very closely to when people tell me the story of how intuition leads them down the wrong path, because I know it's just not true. So he starts telling me that story about how he developed social anxiety, and that to fit in, where there's that ego coming in again, herd mentality, he needed to lie again and again and again, to the point where he lost sight of who he was. And then the ultimate thing was just about to take his own life. And so I said, okay, I let him finish the story. And I said, Mark, let's go back to the story. When you started telling me that story, told me you developed social anxiety, etc. But the first thing you said before you told me you started to lie was, I knew I shouldn't have lied, but. And when you say that, that's your intuition telling you you shouldn't have lied. So he said that right on my podcast. And then he goes into the story of how he had to lie. So he fell prey to the hurdle ego, and he just ignored those signals again and again and again to fit in. And he just lost who he was. He didn't trust himself. He put the trust in everybody else's hands. And the only thing he knew what to do, he was so lost, was potentially take his own life. And he didn't, thank God. And obviously he's doing some wonderful things in the social anxiety space as well.
Wow. As I'm listening to all of this, and, ego being one of the hurdles, it's a big hurdle that we talk about a lot on our podcast in terms of, really having more of a harmonious blended family. Mm-hmm. And like you said, there's all these different personalities, there's different values, there's so many different things that are coming together. So it can be quite chaotic when you do come together. And it's why they say, I think it's an average of 7 years before you finally get your groove. And even then, kids are different ages. There's so much happening. There's always something going on. And mm-hmm. I guess my question is that amongst all of this, with this chaos and oftentimes overwhelm, the reason that we started this podcast to begin with is because people are struggling with that. They're struggling with how they're interacting with someone they were once married to and, mm-hmm. and don't really get along with. So co-parenting is hard. Step parenting is hard. All of these things present various challenges, and ego really does get in the way, especially when it comes to co-parenting. So there's a lot of noise that is happening in their thinking. Mm-hmm. And sometimes the noise is so big, it's like, how can I actually pay attention to any kind of intuition? How can people do that when there's so much noise going on and the ego is so loud?
So there's one thing called an intuitive medium. And again, when you go to the 7-day challenge, this is one of the steps. What an intuitive medium is an environment or an activity that you do that cuts out the noise so that you can actually think clearly. So some people go to meditation and do that. For me, for example, there's a couple of things that I do. One is I go for either long drives, which I love because I'm in London, Ontario, and Toronto is about an hour and a half to 2 hours away. And so I often have a lot of meetings, but it gives me 2 hours and I can have the radio on, or I can have a podcast on, for example. But for me, for some reason, I just zone out, tune out the noise, and I start getting intuitive thoughts. I start thinking about strategy or personal relationships, and I'm listening to that signal. And because I'm so zoned out, that it's just, those signals are so clear. The showers for me, something for me, just before I go to bed is another one. Believe it or not, before I hit my wife and I have this ritual with our 2 kids, both girls, and they're 9 and 14. And so we sleep with each one before, and we have a small discussion, but that's just sort of the bonding exercise that we have. And one of the things that happens to me often is that is such a relaxing place with either the girls, is that even before I hit the pillow, I'm daydreaming. I'm out. I am in my intuitive zone, and I'm starting to think. And in some cases, the girls have to wave in front of my eyes to say, Dad, are you thinking about intuitionology again? And as comical as it is, and I tell them, I'm so relaxed here that the noise just cuts out. And so for everybody, you got to think about what that is, or do you need to go get away? I'll go to Niagara Falls, for example, and we'll rent a room that's overlooking the falls, which is about 30 to 34 floors up. And something about the majestic nature of it, the water flowing, the mist, again, I just zone out. And so you got to figure out what that is and put yourself more so in those environments. And when you get better at putting yourself in those environments and recognizing those signals, because they're going to start coming quicker and quicker and quicker over time, then you'll be able to catch yourself. And you'll also be able to also say, now consciously, I need to take a break. I need to pull away. Or you can feel that negative signal says you're getting too emotional. That's when you got to put the phone down or walk away or take the 5 minutes. But it's those signals that always increase to say, now you got to take a break. And so when it comes to dealing with exes or dealing with past families or caustic situations, or your children don't seem to be, going in my 14-year-old daughter's going through hormones right now, in her stage of puberty. So she's got some issues where, there's lots of, just striking up. She'll just get mad all of a sudden. We have to deal with that. And so I have to be careful not to get too emotional and react on her, to just kind of take a step back and, okay, she's just going through something. Calm down. And when you get better at that, then you start recognizing those signals that come. Now, it doesn't mean that we're all robots. I get my heightened emotion stuff, especially the closer you get to me, the more I'm not as good as dealing with my intuitive signals. But I would say, because I'm deep in this stuff, that more often than not, I'm listening to those signals, and then I can step away. But it takes practice. It takes a lot of practice. And also realize that you can't control the other person. They have their own path. They may be in touch with their intuition. They may have lost their values. And so when I understand, one thing I say is context is everything. So when I see someone that's not doing so well, or they're moving away from me, or I see some behavioral issues, for me, instead of being angry or upset about them, sometimes because they may not be in touch with their intuition, or they may not be trusting themselves, they may have had something in the past. These are some of the things that I think about, to say, well, maybe there's something going on and they have to fix themselves. I can't fix them. That's their path. And so I can only do what I can do based on my intuition. And if it makes it look selfish, that's somebody else's definition of selfish, not mine. My definition is, I'm trusting my intuition. This is the path I'm on. This is the train. This is my track. If you don't like it, get off at the next station. And if you continue to bother me, then I'll kick you off myself. Now, this is an unemotional decision, not my emotions are heightened. I'm saying that to someone. This is just my self-confidence coming through, that these are the decisions I'm going to make. And it's not going to be, I don't care about popularity, but that's what I do. And it's intrinsically motivated. It's motivated from inside, not extra. We're not looking at money, fame, all the stuff that you sometimes see on social media. It's really about me and what I really, really want in life. And this is where you have to have an honest conversation. And when you do, you start to appreciate the differences of others. You start to allow them to be themselves. I allow my daughters to be themselves. And I realize they have their own personality. They're going to have their own failures. And instead of me emotionally getting in there and getting upset about what they do, I back off to say, well, there could be an I told you so moment, or they'll find their path, but it's up to them. I can only help them about making decisions based on intuition now that I talk about it. But when you do give these kids and other people, when you give them the gift of realizing what their intuition is, they start to really, really come into their purpose. And when you figure out what your purpose is, there's nothing like it. And a great example is my 14-year-old daughter. When we went to India, she's an artist. She's been painting since she was 4, and she saw these pieces of artwork. Great. Yet she found out that these were artists that had no arms. And she says, Dad, I want to do something for these people. I mean, they're disabled. Look at them in India, how they're treated. Nobody wants to buy this stuff. I need to help people with disabilities and illnesses. I said, okay, well, that's got to come from you. And so I let her sit on it. And of course, now she's steeped in intuition. So she kind of understands what these things are roughly about, signals and thinking about it and coming from me and purpose, roughly. And 6 months later, she whips her head around. We're playing board games. She says, Dad, I'm ready. I said, I'm not sure what you're talking about. She says, I know. Remember that time in India, you told me to think about what I wanted to do. And I said, yeah, I'm ready. And I said, okay, what do you want to do? I'm going to paint. I'm going to sell my art. I'm going to raise money. I'm going to have people with disabilities come to express themselves, just to feel special. I want to do that so that they can express themselves to feel so amazing. And I said, are you 100% sure? She says, yes. The very next day, we opened up a Canadian nonprofit federal corporation. And a month later, we had our first fundraising event. She raised $5,000. She wanted $2,500. All her originals are sold in 1 hour. We had someone from Scotland FaceTiming, looking at one of her originals. A month later, she has a pop-up event where she brings big brothers and big sisters, people in wheelchairs together, But the moment the purpose hit was when she had someone there with Parkinson's disease. And his name was Carl. Carl says, Avni, come over. Of course, my daughter's name is Avni. Avni, come here. And she says, yes. And she goes, this is what this event is doing for me. Watch. And so his left arm was shaking pretty violently because of his Parkinson's. And he says, I haven't painted since I was in high school. This is like 25, 28 years later. He dips his paintbrush in some paint, puts it to his canvas, and his left arm stops shaking.
Wow.
And he says, this is what your event is doing for me. And that cemented my daughter's purpose. She's 14.
Wow.
She's now raised over $30,000. So when you put this in the hands of a child, when you put this in the hands of people, when you really live your life based on purpose at whatever age, it doesn't matter. And if you think you're a failure, failure is our best friend. And I can tell you that even from neuroplasticity, you take it down to the brain. When you fear or when you fail, your brain neurons are open to creating new pathways. What you have to do is when you go through the fear and you walk through something uncomfortable, your neurons actually start cementing new neural pathways. So you're actually changing your brain by failing.
Yes. I just thought about this the other day, actually, and what you're saying is that so often we wish that we had this clear answer. And like you said, when you fail, it does open up. It's almost like it starts to clear away all that muck because now it's all surfaced. It's surfaced, it's revealed itself in that failure. And now you've actually opened the door to actually see clearly. And like you said, you're open to this. Now there's opportunity for you.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And again, that's the power of intuition. That's your signals, your purpose, your values, your definition. It's everything has to do with you. I don't do anything but just shine a light on it. And so for those who take the 7-day challenge and go through it to figure out that process, and there's a very specific process you go through. I have 2 people actually gone through it with you, so that you can see how they did this. And you can take this with any problem, even with your blended family, with your ex, with something at work. And it's free. And you have a template. It's a PDF that's fillable for any problem you have. You fill one, you just save another one. And with the 2 people, I've got one who actually sold his house in those 7 days. He started with minus $20,000 and he ended up doing $50,000 on a bidding war at day 7. That's a $70,000 decision. That's $10,000 a day. That's not bad. But the one that I'm really proud of and someone who's super, super stoked about what I'm doing is Ashley Michelle. She was a witness to a homicide. She actually walked into her boyfriend's apartment who had just murdered their friend in the bathtub. He asked her to come to the apartment, closed the door behind her, locked it, put a knife to her back and said, "You're next. I'm going away for 1 murder. Might as well make it 2. Her relational intuition got her to calm down and watch him, make sure he was emotionally stable. And he assaulted her, choked her, asked her to clean up the blood, said no. And then her intuition saw an intuitive moment for her to escape, one fleeting moment. And she got it, ran, opened the door, 18 flights of stairs down the apartment building, came out and suffered tremendous PTSD, depression, and anxiety. So she joined the 7-day challenge just to find out how to minimize that, didn't get rid of it. But what she learned in 7 days was that she can trust herself. She can start trusting people. She can actually go back to the gym where we talked about an intuitive medium before. The gym was her intuitive medium where she could have some clear thoughts. And she's such a fan of what I'm doing now. And so what I say is if people like Ashley and John can go through this and solve a problem, you can solve whatever problem you can by going through this. And again, it's a template, it's free, and you keep the template. You don't have nothing to do with me ever, but I've given you something for free for any problem that you have.
And what a great challenge to actually go through in your family.
Absolutely.
With your children. Well, let's talk about where we can get this challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's on intuitionology.com, or I can give you a specific link for your peeps there, everybody listening. And so I can get that to you, and they just sign up and then they go to it. And I've had my girls go through it as well. And funny enough, both of them came up with bullying incidents It's my 9-year-old. Now she was, at the time she took us, she was 8, but it was a bullying incident. I was really surprised. And so even when she's filling it out, I was able to see some of her thought processes. And I was shocked. Like both of them were able to see the bullying behaviors before they got bullied. And because my wife and I talk a lot about values and how if you see behaviors you don't like, you walk away. Don't question them. Don't think about being popular. Don't think about what other people think. If you think that you need to move away because of your values, you do that. And I was really shocked that my 9-year-old, who was 8 at the time, that was one of the things she put in there. It's like, wow, I never knew. But these are internal thoughts, right? And so I'm really happy that this tool really brought that out in her, so that she was consciously doing, like, I was just shocked at, like, it was like doing a test, right? Or a math assignment. She's just really engaged in it. And it just made me so proud as a parent.
Well, I'm going to do this and I'm going to share with our audience how it all turns out. So again, it's Intuitionology. So it's intuition and then ology, OLOGY.com.
That's
We'll
right.
have the links in the show note on the website as well. And it's right there. As soon as you go to the page, you'll see it. Take the 7-day challenge.
Yep.
This is so awesome. I think this is so important. And, as you're on your website, on your homepage, it says intuition is the highest form of intelligence.
Yes.
And I love all of your stories. What I really, really love about them is that a lot of the people in the beginning were like, wait, this isn't concrete. This isn't something in action that you just told me to do. Go sign up for this, or go, save this much money, or go call this person. It's not something like that. Like you said, it's a feeling.
Yeah.
And but we all have, it's something that we all just have. It's not something that you have to go out and get. You just have it already. It's now about paying attention to it.
Absolutely. And I've just published on Monday, we released a big blog. It's a boss blog on the journey, but in there, it talks about people who how they define intuition. I've got Nelson Mandel's grandson and Daba's there. Wow. There's a number of really big, Mike Keenan, former NHL hockey coach. He talks about intuition. So it's intuition from the eyes of different people. I've got someone who lost over $1 million to an online scam. There's another Vin Jang who went and started trusting his intuition, realized he needed to get back to his values, stepped away from that. 6 months of life lost. And what I say is opportunity cost. It's not just the 6 months that he lost. It's also the 6 months that he could have gained. So he actually lost a year of his life. And he's in the business of helping people. He speaks to 100,000 people a year on 80 stages around the world. Basically, I just said, you've also lost not just a year of your life, but how many people did you leave behind? Yeah. And he just said, exactly. I've never thought about it like that.
Wow. I love that so much. Sunil, this has been so awesome. So great. I hope it's getting everybody to think a little bit differently. And I appreciate you so much for coming on and sharing this with us.
No problem. I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks, Summer.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. And we like to say, if you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone you love, and be bold enough to share it with someone you don't. See you next time.